Kia ora. Welcome to the Niche Cast, a podcast from the Niche Cache, which is from Aotearoa, and we are here to serve Aotearoa sport. We're here to broadcast Aotearoa sporting excellence and just have a big old yarn, a big old kōrero about Aotearoa sport. Got a couple of different things on the agenda today. We've got Blackcaps are starting a second test in India on Friday. Got Brad Riddell behind me. He's got a fight against Rafael Fiziev on an UFC card that is a UFC Fight Night card. So that is on ESPN. No pay-per-view. So that's glorious. Sunday afternoon, fucking among everything else, beautiful. We got Wellington Phoenix, men and women, playing footy this weekend. Football Ferns just played against Korea, and I watched the first half of their first game against Korea, and I was amazed that they had lost that game checking in later on. And now they've got a win, as the wildcards picture displays 2-0. So,
well, if you watched the first half of the second game, you'd have also been amazed that they got a win in that one.
Right, yeah.
It's opposite tangents on those ones, trajectories on those ones.
So we have the Football Ferns, big fans of the Football Ferns. There's a lot of F's there. I'm sure that F is a good alliteration word. So they're like
the Ford Football Ferns.
Yep, the Football Ferns headlines will be enjoyable. Although headlines from the Kiwi media, first win in how long? Oh my God. Well, fuck, you try playing the world champs and all that shit over and over again. See how you fucking go. Who cares when their last win was, Follow the Niche Case. They're building. They're growing. They're brewing. And we've got Kiwi cricket happening. We've got men's and women's Kiwi cricket. And who knows, the wild card might dig deep into his bag of tricks for some National Football League as well at some point. I do have one idea to tie a couple things together and get the show started. But first, shout out to Patreon, patreon.com/our niche cache. Extra podcast on Patreon every week. And it's just a good flow of calm, a good flow of positive vibration. So if you do enjoy the Niche Cache and the Niche Cast, join the Patreon whānau. Shout out to the Patreon whānau. Every Monday and Friday, we also deliver an email banger via Substack, thenichecache.substack.com. Sign up, whack in your email address, and you just get the Niche Cache straight to your email address inbox. How about that? An inbox every Monday and Friday evening. Pretty cool. Always extra yarns and links to all the content we've done from the week and all that good stuff. Always writing about Aotearoa sport at theniche-cache.com. And we have mindfulness to do whatever it needs to do. That's the thing. It just does what it does. So what's it going to do today?
What's it going to do? Nothing, probably, which is the point of the mindfulness that I'm going to chuck up. So, on the end of the last variety show, and we do our musical jams things. I said I wanted to watch that Beatles documentary that Peter Jackson has made. I watched the first episode. There's 8 hours of it over 3 movie length. In fact, 2 of them are longer than movie length thing. One of them's nearly 3 hours just for one episode. It's mental. Typical Peter Jackson areas. I don't know if it would have killed him to just do it like a Last Dance style, just do 6 episodes, an hour and 20 minutes max for each. Would that be so hard? I don't know. But yeah, so I got through the first one. Did notice a couple sneaky little Aotearoa nuggets hidden in there by Mr. Jackson, which was appreciative. But yeah, watching that thing and seeing the creative processes of one of the top bands of all time was insane. I was just sitting there for 2.5 hours of this thing, whereas there's nothing much happening. It's mostly just them jamming around, playing bits and pieces of songs and just small talk and things, planning stuff that isn't actually going to happen because they're not actually going to go to Syria and play a big concert in a busted down Coliseum or whatever. It's still stuff that is kind of I don't know, it feels mundane, but it was enthralling just to see the process of all that. And so I thought I'd chuck up just because one of the things what was happening was there was a scene where at one point think John Lennon's talking to some random dude about plastic for some reason. Ringo's just talking to someone else's wife for a while. I don't know what George was doing at the point, but Paul McCartney's just hanging at the, like, it's just cutting between these other people doing small talk. And Paul McCartney's just sitting at the piano, starting to compose Let It Be. So I thought I'd do that for my mindfulness. I'll just say, like, Paul McCartney, quote, let it be. You know, it was because I had like a partly the way that scene was framed, and then also just thinking about like a song like that, which is, you know, great song, and a song that pretty much everyone knows. People know it even if they don't know they know it. It's one of those types of things. When you hear a song so often, it sort of loses meaning. It's that kind of thing like when you're a kid and you just repeat the same word over and over until it doesn't make sense to you anymore. Like you get like a dissociative kind of thing going on. And it just clicked to me for, I don't know if it's the first time I've ever thought about it on that level, but like, what good advice? What good advice? Yeah, like just, you know, let it be. Find yourself in times of trouble, just let it be. So you can't control stuff that you can't control. So, you know, take it in your stride. Let it be. Chill.
We shall let it be. And let some other things be in the niche case Kiwi sports bucket. One thing we are also, the Shoshin mindset has also been prevalent in the last few months of the niche cast, and that just basically means learning and always learning, always.
Yeah, the literal thing is, I think, beginner's mindset. Yeah,
so just keep learning. So one reflection I had about the Blackcaps test and the first test draw against India was that I was learning from the Blackcaps. And we've been learning for a while. Like, it's not exactly new. Like we've Trent Bolt and Tim Southey have developed a delivery that not many other bowlers in the world. They had ways to move the ball both ways, but Tim Southey and Trent Bolt, they developed, you know, the three-quarter seam delivery that we've talked about, and to use it to great effect. But this was really heavy in the Indian test, where like just some of the plans that like Tom Latham was using, the sweep shot, some of the batsmen playing off the back foot to slower pitch deliveries, second innings, a lot of front foot forward defensive shot out of the foot marks, and just seeing Kane Williamson and Will Young emulating Kane Williamson's like late hands and how the hands are in front of the rest of the bat. And playing cricket in India and just the whole process, I was learning and I was picking up things that the Blackcaps were doing to win or at least draw the test. And this is something that I think is present in a lot of these other sports that we cover, because we've also got Brad Riddell fighting this weekend. And through the uptick in UFC fighters from New Zealand, I am learning the intricacies of mixed martial arts and the intricacies of the UFC. And through city kickboxing, I have had a fantastic learning experience because there's incredibly smart people there running the stuff. And they're like with interviews with Eugene Behrman, how he's talking about the business of the UFC, how he's talking about stylistic things, and how Riddell operates, some of the stoicism, maybe the tactical nous. It's all beautiful. And then you've got across the other things we're thinking about this week, you've got a lot of women's sport. And every time I watch a game of women's Super Smash, I'm learning how women's cricket is different to men's cricket. It's just a different game. And that's all good. That's what makes it that's why I want to view it, because it's different. It's a different challenge. It's a different test. Like, you don't have 135K plus deliveries. You got more slower deliveries that can be harder to hit, that can swing more. Like the wrong-ins that the leg spinners bowl, like in the Super Smash, they're so flighted and they're much slower and they get massive rip. And it's just a whole different challenge. It's a whole different test. Not every batter is hitting sixes. They're batting in T20 cricket, and it's like, yeah, you got to hit fours. You got to be rotating the strikes. Far different challenge. We got the Wellington Phoenix and football Ferns, where you've been learning, or you've had to watch a lot more women's football over the last 5 years than you probably did before. So learning how that's a different game, learning more about how the Wellington Phoenix, like they're building a team and a club. Like all these things have stuff you can like. They are exhibitions of learning as well as did you win or lose, which I found interesting. And that also just sparked, and reflecting on the first test and watching that Blackcaps, and what excited me about the Blackcaps performance, it was they are showing us things about test cricket. They are showing other teams how to compete in India. They are showing different skills used at different times, like to the best of their abilities. And that's kind of something that ties everything that we're discussing together, but it's also quite fun. It's quite entertaining to pick up those things as well.
Yeah, I have probably, I don't know, it's not new. Like it's something I've probably always, since I've been writing about football, tried to incorporate. But definitely at the moment, I'm finding myself, you know how you will go through like, you know, ebbs and flows of things that catch your attention for a little while, and you go in and out of interests like that, and things like just, you know, in all sorts. It might be like an album that you listen to in rotation for a little while, and then you don't listen to it again for like 6 more months. Or I've been trying to sort of up the tactical side of when I'm writing about football, in particular National League stuff. And I did the first football Ferns game, I wrote quite a bit about like their high press and trying to break down the ways in which that is. And I think it's a really interesting angle, because it's something that, like, you know how football's especially notorious for this as well. Like there's just coaching development type things going on all the time. Like coaches are constantly going to conferences and learning from other coaches and picking up little tools, but you don't necessarily get that reflected in the way that the sport is written about. So the thing that fans have access to. And obviously I think that most coaches, there's also guesswork there, because I'm trying to, one of the reasons I love the football tactical side thing so much is because it's not black and white. Like you can break down, and I have so much respect for like commentators like, you know, Chris Collinsworth is amazing at it in the NFL, or Tony Romo as well, who can just like watch a play live while they're commentating about it. And then as soon as the replay's on, like they haven't gone back and studied everything. They'll be, in fact, Tony Romo does it as the play's unfolding, using his quarterback experience of like reading a defense and being like, well, they're set up this way, they're set up that way. So probably what you're going to see here is a run to the outside with a, you know, or a, you know, play action handoff and then a sweep to the left, or all these, like he's just calling plays before they've even happened. That stuff's incredible, but it's quite rigid. You know how American sports can be like that. Like the play is designed to unfold in one way. And then it's just a battle of execution and what the defense shows you as well. And with football, there's not a right or wrong way to do anything, which is so interesting, because it becomes about like, obviously the execution thing is part of it too. But also it becomes almost like philosophical. You get coaches talking a lot about their philosophy rather than just their strategies. Like on one hand, it's super pretentious. On the other hand, it's cool, man. It's like, it's something that there are other sports that reach into the same bag as well. But football is quite, because I guess it's just such a big sport, it's quite notorious for that. And so the tactical thing is kind of the same. Like there's a bit of guesswork. I'm obviously not getting information from coaches. So sometimes like a 4-3-3 and a 4-2-3-1 formation look exactly the same, especially if your wingers are being like extra aggressive, or number 10 is dropping a bit deeper because you're out of the position a lot, or, you know, things like that. There's guesswork, there's sort of a lot of gray area, but I also find that quite fun to traverse, because for one thing, it means I can't be explicitly wrong. I can just say, well, that's just the way I saw it. That's the way the game kind of unfolds. And I back myself to have some decent sort of understanding on how a lot of that goes. But I find it so interesting to hear when players, coaches, you know, there's a couple of very good books about this type of stuff, and just listening to, you know, some of the more educated, you know, podcasters or journalists around the world as well, who can break some of the stuff down really well. I just find that stuff so fascinating, and I'm constantly trying to get that like that Shoshin going with that just keep that beginner's mindset of just like, I want to hear all the information about the stuff and just absorb it all, and then I can try churn out stuff. Like at the moment, the pressing stuff is real in focus, because as a Manchester United fan, going from a team who doesn't do any pressing, they've just hired a German like Godfather-esque manager for the rest of the season, who is notorious for inspiring a lot of the German high pressing and stuff, and from coaches like Tuchel and Klopp and whatever. And so that's been something that's talked about a lot. And then the Ferns have, at the same time, like this lovely coincidence, the football Ferns have been trying to be a team that presses a lot. So just trying to understand the reasonings and the ways in which that unfolds and the little like trigger movements that, because you got to break things down into patterns a little bit. So like, at what point do they press? Is it when the goalkeeper has the ball? Is it when the goalkeeper plays the pass out? Or is it trying to shift a team into the corner and then target them where they have that extra sideline to work with as well? Because the team obviously can't pass it out that way. It's a little easier to trap them. Like these kind of things I'm just finding so fascinating at the moment, and trying to reflect some of that in how I write about this stuff too.
What was different in the football Ferns for this entire Korea series, 2-game series from the Canada series? Because it was primarily the same group of players, and there wasn't much in and out, and it was still a very young group. Had the superhero Rhea Percival and a couple of other veterans in the mix, but there was still a super young group who basically had the experience against Canada and could then parlay that into a series against Korea. Korea not as good as Canada, and a totally different situation as far as attending Canada's party for themselves and just playing regular exhibition friendlies against Korea. So what was different between those two series, just to summarize like where the football Ferns are at right now? And as part of that summary, like what take it a bit deeper than like this was their first win since whatever, like kind of, especially because you've got the Olympics as well, so kind of end with how this is we're moving forward with this group and how maybe good the group is as well as the wider group below them. But yeah, start with just like what was different from the Canada series to Korea, and then open it up moving forward type of stuff.
Yeah, the thing about getting that first win in ages is that I think it's huge for the group. I think it's like a massive galvanizing is the wrong word, but just a big boost, like a proof that what they're doing is working and can work and will continue to get better and stuff like that. So I think it's massive from that perspective. But had they not won that game, I don't think the trajectory changes. You know what I mean? I think there's still like this was Jukka Clover's second tour in charge of the team. And against Canada, the first game was crap, which that was 5-1. They weren't very good. Second game they only lost 1-0, and there was massive improvement between game 1 and game 2, and it just felt like they had that baseline now. The first game, you could at least break it down from a performance standpoint and say, well, this is like, you have video now to say these are the areas where we want to improve. This positioning isn't good enough. This needs to, this player should have made this run, or it's a lot easier to start to implement ideas after that. And also, like, I actually think it's an underrated aspect of Klimkova is the amount of like, she coached an under 17s Kiwi team 7 or 8 years ago. If you're under 17s 7 or 8, 9 years ago, whatever it was, you're probably coming towards being a key player for the senior team right about now. So I think players like Daisy Cleverly, Michaela Moore had worked with her at that time, and then but also she took the under 20 group that was after that, the next cycle of that. So she didn't coach it. I think McFarlane was coaching then, I can't remember, but she was an assistant with that team. So like when Ashley Ward is picked out of the blue to be part of this group, playing like 4th tier in England, which was a big surprise. But like I looked back at some of the groups. Well, has she worked with her before? And yeah, she was with Klimkova when Klimkova was an assistant coach for the under 20s at a World Cup. So she knows a bit about this player, like things like that. I think there's definitely an existing relationship, which has helped. But it is different, obviously, being the head coach. And I think what you saw between game 1 and game 2 was a much more, reinforced mindset as much as anything. Like you can say they're passing the ball around nicely from the back, actually trying to keep possession. That's cool, but it's not really even a tactical thing. That's a confidence, a belief thing. It's like players being told, I trust you to make this pass, to hold on, like don't just hoof it away. like so many male and female New Zealand internationals have done in the past. When you win the ball in defense, they'll just hoof it up the field and hope a striker will run after it. Like, put your foot on it, look up. Is there a teammate you can pass to? Is there a midfielder dropping in that you can link up with? A fullback in a bit of space beside you, and then play that pass and actually like drop into a position where you can get a return if they get in trouble. Things like that. It's just slowing the game down a little bit early in the phases, but it's just like all these players can do that. There's bits and pieces where, especially playing through the midfield when they're under a bit of pressure, there's been some sloppy touches creeping in, but that's part of the process as well that you got to go through. I think as much as anything, yeah, that's confidence and belief, and that comes from the coach telling players, I'm not going to drop you if you get in a bit of trouble playing it out, because I understand we're trying to shift things here, and that takes time. That was the major difference from game 1 of Canada to game 2 of Canada. From Canada to Korea, what you started to see in the first game was the high pressing. Part of it was, I think, playing against a Korean team who don't necessarily, they definitely build the ball up. Like, they're not as direct as what Canada were, so they were able to trap them a little bit more. Like, it wasn't a terrible matchup from that perspective, but yeah, just seeing them suddenly being proactive without the ball, not sit back, not like two banks of like 4 or maybe a 4 and a 5, close together, sit out like just in front of your penalty box, like, tidy low block, park the bus. None of that. Like, let's actually push players forward and try win the ball high up the field, where we can also turn defense into attack, because the closer you win the ball and the closer you win possession to the opposition's goal, closer, I mean, the sooner you can get a shot away, right? And you can get a shot away in that transitional period between a team having to go from in possession to out of possession. So they're like attacking shape to their defensive shape, which generally is going to be different. Just as a blanket rule in football, generally what you see is like, with the ball, spread out. Without the ball, compact. So if you can hit a team in between that, like, that's why a lot of teams across world football like to do this high pressing thing, is because if you win the ball in that high up area, you're attacking the defense before they're set, and there's going to be opportunities that stem from that. And the Ferns, let's not forget, are a team that have struggled to break the teams down. So here's a way to sort of bypass that problem a little bit. I thought it was it's super risky, because if a team can pass around it, your defense is exposed, and there's going to be heaps of space behind the midfield, which is not ideal. But that's part and parcel of it. That's the risk and reward. That's how you balance those things. So that's what I saw heaps from them in the first game against Korea. Unfortunately, they kind of tired themselves out after the first half without getting a reward. Like, they didn't score when they were on top, and they needed to. Korea adjusted at halftime, got a lot better. They did score, and they won that game. Well, actually, the Ferns did score, didn't they? They were 1-0 up at halftime, but they should have been like, they needed to be 2 or 3 if they were going to hold on, at least 2. Like, they needed a second goal to really hammer home that dominance, because 1-0 is a very, very precarious lead. But that's exactly what you'd say about Korea, because the fourth game of Klimkova's reign, the second against Korea, the Ferns got absolutely battered in the first half. It was bad. Like, Korea just picked up where they left off in the first one, and just like, the Ferns couldn't press, because the thing about high pressing is you've got to, as I put it in the write up, if you're going to like press high, you've got to be high in order to do it, so to speak. So if you're in your own half, there's nothing you can do about that. You're just in defensive mode. And yeah, they got pegged back, but somehow they held on. Korea should have been 3-0 up, if not more. They missed some chances. And the Ferns, I think that's probably the most, because there wasn't really anything tactical. You saw what they wanted to do with the ball against Canada. You saw what they wanted to do without the ball against Korea. It was just more of the same in the second game against Korea. It's not like anything changed. And arguably, like, the one thing that did change was the opposition got better, and they were less successful at those things. And yet they won the game because they hung in there. They didn't concede when they were in trouble. And then they scored a couple late goals through a couple nice, Olivia Chance just being amazing with her distribution as always, just setting things up. Like, that's I think probably the main lesson from that second game there, from that win, is that they didn't play that well. There's a lot of room where they can get a lot better, especially from that first half, which was kind of bad. but they dug through the difficult parts and definitely grew in confidence when they realized that they'd gotten through the best of what Korea had to offer. And then started creating their own chances, feeling like they were in the game. And it's not a coincidence then that they rolled home, scored a couple late goals, and big celebrations at the end. It was awesome. Like that's maybe the most promising part of that, is that we've seen progress being made in how they want to play the game. We've already seen reward, and we saw reward for that kind of stylistic change in a way where they weren't even really anywhere near their best, necessarily speaking. Like that, if you're winning on, I mean, it's often been the case with the Ferns that they've had good wins against better teams before. Generally have to be somewhere close to their best in order to do that. Here they won a game where they weren't at their best, and that just shows how much further they could still go on top of this, because it's very early days for Conclova, second tour, right? Hasn't even had a lot of her key players involved yet. That's pretty promising. That's pretty encouraging, right?
What do the Wellington Phoenix men and women have in common? So what do you, because I'm thinking like we've got a Wellington Phoenix men where the focus is on defense, and the Wellington Phoenix men play Western Sydney later on Saturday night. The Wellington Phoenix women, they play Western Sydney 7 o'clock Saturday night. So it's a bit of a Wellington Phoenix party on Saturday. We just got to keep things moving along in the podcast. So just try and like you can, I'm just thinking like, is there a world in which like some of the things that we're focusing in on with the Wellington Phoenix men that apply to the women? Maybe it's that a lot of their really good players that they've signed are in defense, and suddenly the defensive focus is across both things. I'm also thinking about how the Wellington Phoenix, when I've watched them this season, they've got a couple of different points of attack. They've got different players and different methods and different areas they can score goals from. So maybe that is a strength of the Wellington Phoenix female roster, is they've got 3 or 4 different strikers and creative midfielders. I'm not sure, and I'm asking you, what is something that both squads, and then obviously we've got games played for the men, something that is across both teams for the Wellington Phoenix ahead of their first double header of the season?
Yeah, Friday night, I think it is, the double header, the
December 3rd,
Phoenix
yes.
double header. Enjoyable Friday evening there. So I don't know. I'm actually having to think about that quite a bit, because I'm not sure where the parallels might be necessarily. I guess if there is one, and it's a contextual one, because this word means different things in the women's A-League to what it does in the men's A-League. But I think the youth of both teams is a big factor, and inexperience probably comes with that. But like the men's team have a lot of academy play. In fact, they've just added 3 more academy players that are going over because they're busy, like, set of fixtures for the next month or two. They've just sent 3 more academy dudes over. So like that's there's a lot of those guys in the squad, not necessarily going to be getting like all the minutes. They're filling out benches and just being there for training numbers and stuff, and stepping up if others get injured. But even then, a lot of, like, when we've talked about their defense, there's Callan Elliott had only played a handful of A-League games, really. He's starting right back right now. James McGarry's had 1 A-League season. He didn't play he has had a stint in Holland, in the Netherlands, playing professionally, where he's played like top flight footy there, but mostly as a bench player. Didn't get a massive amount of starts while he was over there, and was a little bit in and out last season. Tim Payne and Josh Laws, both converted centre backs. Like Clayton Lewis only joined the team last season. Alex Rufer has been with the team for quite a while. He's probably an exception to the rule, but it's along with the 2 English strikers. But Reno Piscopo is awaiting, like, this is supposed to be his breakout season. He's been around a couple of years, but he hasn't had the major breakthrough sort of thing. And they are a young team. They don't have a lot of older veterans in that group. Young for them means a lot of players aged around like 20 to 24 age, though. Young for the women's team means a lot of players aged like 17 to 19. They're super young, but also that league trends younger. The women's A League is often or A-League women, I think is the technical term, is often seen as a little bit of a stepping stone league, especially in the last year or two, because a lot of the best Matildas players have like just gone overseas playing. A lot of them actually all went to England, and Rebecca Stott was part of that for a little while. She's back now, obviously, had to come back and take care of the old health. There's a little more leeway for being extra young in that thing. But I think even by A-League women's standards, that Wellington Phoenix team is going to be super young. You're going to see their vice captain is Kate Taylor, who's like 18 years old, I think. So it gives you a bit of an indication. There's I think 3 players currently in the squad who have played A-League women's before. There's 1 player who's played international, and there's only a couple caps for Grace Jale. There's probably more than half the squad have not had professional contracts before. Like the youth and inexperience of that team is pretty massive. It's the overwhelming factor for the women's team in particular. Men's a little bit further along, but you compare them to other A-League rosters who are going to be challenging for final spots, and they're a lot younger than plenty of them. I will say, because it's often held up as like I have seen it held up as a thing of like, this is a reason to not be so confident about what the Wellington women's team is going to be doing. And it's fair to say they don't really have a whole lot of expectations. I'm going to write about this, trying to just sort of like break down that idea of what can we expect and what should we expect from them. Most likely, like they'll be favorites to finish last, probably. If you combine the fact that they're playing overseas, a lot of players haven't done that before first professional contracts. It makes sense that would be the case. But I will just say that like there was a flurry of Kiwi players in what was then called the W League last season. That includes Lily Allfeld, who's the captain of the Wellington Phoenix now. Malia Steinmetz was another one. Claudia Bunge, who played every minute for the champion Melbourne Victory team. Like Liz Anton in there as well. Paige Satchel had played professionally before in Germany, but this was the first time where she had like an extended run of games. Like there was quite a few players there who hadn't played a lot at that level, who came in and instantly looked at home. You know, a lot of players who have spent most of their football playing domestically in New Zealand, and the step for them upwards, because they were the best players of that domestic scene, but the step for them to get to the A-League women's thing and be like contributing play, like Liz Anton was the player of the year for Perth. I've already mentioned what Claudia Bunge did. Like that's a decent bit of encouragement, I think, for a lot of players, because you look at if you're looking at Alyssa Wynnum and Charlotte Lancaster, who are there as academy players, 17-year-olds, like, sure, fair enough. There's a level of adapting that needs to take place, but like Chloe Knott is very much in that same bracket as what she was doing domestically is very much the same as what like Claudia Bunge and Liz Anton were doing. Only she's a year or two older. Like that, Grace Jale, exactly the same. Like I don't chucking Kelly Brown and what's her name, Grace Wojcicki as well. Like I don't know that the step up is as much as people make it out. For the best players, for the best players from the Kiwi domestic leagues, we've seen in recent times a lot of good examples of them kind of seamlessly stepping up to this level. So I think that's definitely something that the Phoenix team should be encouraged by.
Quick vibe check on both games. Western Sydney Wanderers, what's going to happen for the men and the women?
Women, no clue. Like this just realistically bit of a truncated preseason, having to relocate, a lot of players who'll be making their league debuts. I think it's hard to predict them to get anything out of that game, but I think with them, like the first month is more the telling point. If they I think some of those adjustments won't come straight away. It'll take them a few games to get up to speed, but we'll see where they are after a month of some of these results and whether they can start turning. Because I mean, like that Perth Glory team that had 3 Kiwis in last year, didn't win a game. So it's not like there is a little bit of a gap between the best teams and the worst teams. So there'll be winnable games in there for them for sure. The men's team, I mean, 3 points. I don't know. I'm not particularly intimidated by any of the other teams that we've seen so far. I think the Phoenix probably feeling pretty good about themselves, having won last week. Just as keep the unbeaten streak going, I think is the main thing. If they don't lose, 5 points from their first 3 games is still a pretty good start. And then I don't know, see how it goes. I haven't watched any of Western Sydney actually to this point. So don't believe they have a New Zealander on their roster, which is generally what I look for in other A-League teams. But beatable, why not? Kick some ass. Gary Hooper get a couple more goals, why not?
Someone who kicks a lot of ass is Brad Riddell, and he is fighting Rafael Fiziev on Sunday in the UFC. Quite an interesting matchup, let alone the fight will be pretty epic. And just to tell that story, Brad Riddell, very active and hectic striker. He averages 4.75 strikes landed per minute, and his opponent, Rafael Fiziev, averages 5.34 strikes per minute. And apparently, while Riddell has been very comfortable in takedown situations up till now, Rafael Fiziev hasn't really been tested in that department, but he's apparently very good. And that's coming from Riddell, because Riddell and Fiziev used to train together and work at Tiger Muay Thai. So they're friends to some extent. So this is basically, Riddell said in a couple of interviews that there were just no matchups ahead of him in the rankings, and that while he wanted to, like, they had kind of been talking, we'll fight each other for like a bout type of thing. Like, that's when you want to fight each other if you're kind of friends or compañeros. But there were not many other matchups. So he's going to fight Rafael Fiziev on Sunday. And Riddell's in the same division as Dan Hooker's been in, but Dan Hooker's showing now that he wants to cut weight down to the division below. And Riddell, so that takes that, if that does happen, which is far more interesting than the possibility of like City Kickboxing moving overseas as a camp, which was blown up by the media. But Dan Hooker, he can actually move weight divisions, and it opens up Brad Riddell's shot to the top of the division if he keeps winning, and it might help Dan Hooker reinvigorate this latter stage of his career as well. So that's happening. You've got the fact that Fiziev and Riddell are friends. You've got the fact that this is going to be a brutal matchup, because Brad Riddell has gone the distance in all 5 of his wins, I think. And like, a lot of his fights are extremely brutal. And there's like moments where you get a bit of wincy. There's other moments where you're just watching him swing it like some poor soul, and you're like, yeah, fuck that dude up. So it does get a bit crazy watching Brad Riddell, but he has always, like, since I really started tuning into City Kickboxing, he's been a dude who you just knew was going to be pretty damn good. And this is another big matchup for Brad Riddell to kind of solidify his standing as one of the best prospects in this division. I think it's the lightweight division. So it's pretty cool. And it also sparks up a City Kickboxing. I think Kai Kara France fights next weekend. And like, the whole thing about moving overseas, they're already kind of overseas right now. Eugene Behrman's in America. Dan Hooker stayed in America. Frank Hickman, their wrestling coach who did the wrestling at Tiger Muay Thai, he is based in America, so that's where Dan Hooker's training. Gina Fabian from the Professional Fighters League, she is training in America. She has been living in America this whole time. Kai Kara France is going over for his fight. So there's already like a little mini Team City Kickboxing move that's happening right now. Of course, Israel Adesanya didn't say that, so New Zealand media isn't really tuned into that. So it's weird how that stuff all works. It's basically happening right now. But the good thing is Team City Kickboxing, like, they're all there for Brad Riddell. the reason it's good to have them all there is for Brad Riddell's fight, and then it'll be Kai Kara France's turn. And so like when I heard Dan Hooker being interviewed, he was like, no, we're all here just to help Brad Riddell. And like that's a buzz for Dan Hooker to be there helping his teammate train and prepare for the next fight. So it's kind of cool how regardless of whether they've moved, like they've just recently shifted to the USA, like Riddell and Behrman for this fight, Dan Hooker's been there, Gina Fabian's been there. Regardless of how they get there, they're all there for each other to prepare that person for their fight. And that's the culture, the team vibe kind of stuff with CKB.
Yeah, obviously a lot of that stuff gets filtered through the COVID lens. But like stepping back from that, how many sports are there where you can compete at the top level and still live in your house in New Zealand full time? With it, like the combat sports are a bit unique because you only fight a couple times a year, so it's you get that opportunity. I get that normally city kickboxing haven't had to like they've been able to go to and fro, but and this is not them complaining either. Like they're all sweet as with doing what's got to be done. This is more the way it's been reacted to. Like cricket, you can live at home, but you're away for long stretches on tours and playing in foreign leagues and stuff. Rugby, you can live at home. Netball, you can live at home. If you happen to get a Wellington Phoenix contract, although even then, like Phoenix and Breakers and whatever, Warriors even as well, last year, 2 years, living overseas for the duration of their seasons in order to get that done. Yes, that wouldn't normally be the case, but like the majority of sports, you've got to go overseas in order to chase that dream. You know what I mean? Like a young footballer who's not coming up through the Wellington and Phoenix Academy is like, it's the first thing they'll do when they get the opportunity is pop over to Europe and get a contract somewhere. Like, and you just got to go over there and do that. Like, or a university in the States is an option a lot of them take. It's really not that unique if people, step back a little bit further and look at it from a more of a wider perspective.
It's like, it's more than just every sport's different and every person's different. So some, like you mentioned the Warriors, how many Warriors players or Warriors juniors move to Australia and they're so much better? Well, fuck, they get to like move to Australia. Like that's a life experience for them. And that's everything there is different for each, because even within that NRL context, like many of these fans, they celebrate like all these different elements of American sport. And then you've got NRL players who don't want to leave Sydney for their career, but that's not anything negative to that. It's just like, it's so like every sport is different. So every sport is apples and oranges, like, and because that means by nature of fighting, you're only fighting 3 or 4 times a year. So why would you move somewhere else? If your best camp is in when you're comfortable and you're only fighting like max 4 times a year, most likely 2 or 3. So that's like a weekend, 3 weekends out of every year where you are in the like fighting. Day before, day after, preparation, recovery, where you're in that zone to fight. And then you just fly back to New Zealand. So like every sport's different. They're all sports, so they're all fruits and vegetables, but it's apples, oranges, lettuce, it's all that shit. Then you're just getting too political about like the MIQ and stuff like that, because different sports just certainly do have favoritism, and some of the politicians have other types of tisms. But yeah, just every like, if we're as a fun like thought process, like how these, because I don't want to judge any of the sports or any of the athletes, so just as a fun thought process, like experiment, like how every sport has a different, because if you're a young footballer, you grow up knowing and idolizing the move overseas. That's a completely different cultural thing. If you're growing up fighting, like if you're growing up watching one of these city kickboxing dudes, you're seeing them around, you're seeing them in your community, and then they go overseas or they bring a big fight to New Zealand. Like if you're a boxer watching Joseph Parker, you've seen him fight in New Zealand And so you've seen him bring the boxing world to New Zealand, which Adesanya would want to do, UFC. And then you've seen him go overseas and fight overseas. So it's like that impacts your judgment. Like every sport, you grow up idolizing the professionals at that level. Like if you grow up and you're like, I want to be an NBA player, you're growing up knowing that you're flying to a different city every fucking week, and it's just how it is. Or if you grow up in like, you're up in Townsville, up in North Queensland, and you're like, nah, I don't want to go to Canberra, it's too cold. Well, it's like, that's just the thing there. I don't know. It's like, you can't beat judgment. It's like, well, fuck, like, who cares what the weather is, bro? Like, you're a fucking professional sports player. Like, enjoy it. But that's the judgment, where it's just I think it is an important note. Every sport has a different living situation, and none of them are the same, really, because they all have so many different influences and impacts. But you can, just a quick thought for you to bounce back on that before we go to the Blackcaps. Any other stuff along those lines?
Well, I mean, in the along the line of the every sport is different thing, imagine being an NBA player where like they don't like trade deadline comes along and someone just like your agent calls you up and is like, by the way, pack your bag, you now play in like I don't know, Sacramento or something. Like you've been traded to Sacramento, that you've got to go there. Like you don't even have a say in the matter. It's just like you wake up one day, you're playing for, I don't know, Miami or something. The next day you've been traded to, wherever. You've been traded to Portland. You've been traded to Charlotte. Like it's very crazy how that goes on. Because
if Brandon Smith did what he did in an NBA context, it would be a bit ridiculous. Like, let's be fair. Like if he's playing for the Milwaukee Bucks and he's just won the premiership, and then he goes off and he's saying, I want to win a comp in the Lakers jersey, it's going to be a bit like, fair play. That's a bit ridiculous. Like that's just how it appears. It's a bit crazy. But just think of the extreme differences between those situations, encompassing everything. So obviously that won't happen in the NBA, because you're not going to sign a fucking deal, as I said on the variety show, for a year in advance. Like that's what I'm saying here. So in the NBA, you can be traded almost any moment to a destination where you have no say, which like that encompasses everything. It can, like how shit that situation would be, your lack of power, the fact that they have the trade stuff all organized, right? Then you go to the NRL where Brandon Smith did what he did, and there's articles counting how many swear words he said. Like, who gives a fuck?
Yeah, I saw that. Like, none of that sitting shit matters. Watching it back, counting, tallying. Like, whose job is that? That's ridiculous.
So that's part of the coverage about that. Let alone the fact that he's discussing something that fits into an incredibly flawed system, like compared to the NBA, but then also maybe some of the player power stuff, where in that trade situation you got no power. And Brandon Smith's situation, he is expressing his maximum power. So it's like, those two things are both exist, and they have good and bad elements, but it's an exercise in seeing how vastly different those two things are. And when you think about how many NRL players love the NBA, it's also weird that their little sports thing is so different to the NBA in a bunch of different ways. Like, it's all it's quite messy when you get like as deep as we're getting now, and it's like confusing, but it's just like, again, that's why you have to view every sport differently. You have to view the context around them differently for everything, because whether it's the living situation or whether it's how we view the player market in the NRL, because everything we're basing our NRL player market stuff off is influenced by NBA, NFL, trade talk, salary cap, all that shit. Like, it's like comparing like fucking filtered water to fucking toilet water or bong water. Like, it's terrible. The NRL whole system is fucked, and people are viewing it through the educated, efficient lens of like Zach Lowe. Because how many NBA fans, they listen to Zach Lowe, Bill Simmons, Bobby Marks or someone like that. They're getting all their shit about the NBA through that. And then they come into the NRL trying to apply all that shit where there's no information about the salary cap. There's no like structure around player movements. It's all very strange, but it just comes back to viewing every sport differently because there's not a whole lot in common other than making money and putting on a show type of stuff.
So I think what you're saying there is that trying to make sense of the way that the NRL does its player movement stuff is like drinking used bong water.
Never been one to drink used bong water.
No, I wouldn't recommend it.
Or Botley water or squeezy water, anything else, any type of that water, and definitely not one to be discussing NRL salaries. Like, I
It's
literally
such a simple solution too. Like, just have a window. It's so dumb.
Let it be. It is what it is. You just
Let it be.
have to let it be. Let it be.
Yes, Paul.
But you like, I have to let this be. In a league where no one, like, we don't even have a figure for the 2023 salary cap. There is no official figure for the 2023 salary cap. So, most important thing, not known. But even for next season, we don't know official player salaries. So if I don't know official player salaries, let alone the actual salary cap for a fucking season, how can I talk about it? It's not going to happen. I'm not going to do it. Like, it just seems ridiculous. I'd rather like use all that muscle until it's kind of fixed and ironed out for an entertaining media content style. I'll just use that muscle thinking about the NBA and sharpen it like that. But I can't come into the NRL and do like New Zealand Warriors salary cap breakdown. They have this player on 250K and then he's got a player option into this year because we don't even fucking know that he's on 250K. We don't even know like how his salary escalates or decreases throughout the years of a contract, player options, team options. In summary, it seems like every month there is a new story about an option in Kalen Ponga's contract. And it's like a new clause. It's a new option. And it's like fucking always happening every couple of months. So people are just like, they're either finding a new clause and this contract has a lot of clauses and a lot of team option, player option stuff, or they're just making it up, and it's completely logical to make it up when there is no official transparent information. That's kind of sums up how crazy it all is, like, to be honest.
Are we sure it's a contract and not just the menu at Subway?
It's like if they win the premiership, he has an exit clause to go to the All Blacks, and then he's only got a All Blacks clause. So if he can get out of his contract, only go to the All Blacks. And it's like, if they lose the premiership, he's got an option in his favor to stay. And if he it's ridiculous.
Right. So like toasted with the cheddar and then the little lettuce and tomato but no olives and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That sounds a bit messy, but I mean, it was a heftily negotiated contract when he signed that, wasn't it? Because it was a big deal, luring Kalen Ponga over. So I could imagine they would have been able to sneak a few of those. Like, that's the thing about like the NBA thing of, you can get traded at any point before the trade deadline, but also players who are, it's like a status thing to get to be a player good enough to earn like a no trade clause in your contract. If you get to that point, you're doing good. And then also, like, either if you're a good, helpful player for a team, they're probably not going to trade you unless they suck and are trying to rebuild at the end of the season, in which case you probably want to be traded because you get to go to a better team. So there's ways in which that works out as well. But yeah, it's a strange situation. Let's talk Blackcaps, eh?
Sorry, I was about to add one more, and then there's no point. Fuck that shit. Blackcaps, Shoshin mentality. This is how I'm going to frame the Blackcaps for your wildcard. Shoshin mentality. What do you take away from that first test, learning about them? Whether it's an intricate detail, is like the stuff I was talking about. Did you learn something from the Blackcaps in that first test that you've been thinking about over the last few days coming into the second test that you think might be applied?
I don't think it's something I learned, but it's just something that's reinforced that we already knew about them. It's just how well they adapt to different conditions. And there was adapting going on during the course of that test match too. It's not like they just came in with the perfect, like they had to, this is normal test cricket stuff, is that over the course of 5 days, the pitch changes. The other team adjusts what they're trying to do to you. They see what was successful in the first innings. They try different things, second innings. And I think just the way that the Blackcaps, as they often do, is what we've seen them do in tournament stuff, and just throughout home summers, and really just the way in which they're able to consistent. I think there is a Shoshin thing from their point of view to that as well, because in order to be able to adapt on the fly, you have to not be overly like, what's the word, just overly committed to just like the way you've done things before. Like you have to be able to say, this thing that we normally do, we're not going to do it this time. And to like, because you take those things for granted, just the patterns of how you normally play. And the Blackcaps playing with, effectively 3 spinners in their side to 2.5. Ravindra didn't get massive overs, but he was still there as an option. That's different, and that adjusts how you use your bowling lineup. I think, things, that's just one small example throughout the course of a test. I think it was with the bat really where it was the most notable, particularly in the way they attacked that. Attacked is the wrong word because there was not a lot of attacking going on, but that 4th innings where it was like, we're not going to come out here and try win this from the start. We're not even necessarily going to try win it at all. We need to know that we're in a position where we won't lose if we're going to go for it. I thought at first that India had just left it. I thought it was a very generous declaration, to be honest, from India. But I changed my mind watching day 5 because just reminded me of the way that the Blackcaps had struggled for runs. They'd occupied the crease quite well, but they'd struggled for runs. Like the run rate was pretty low in their first innings, and it was lower in the 4th innings there because of obvious reasons. India is high on the attack, and New Zealand have at least got to get through the night watchman batted for quite a while as well, which is a big deal in terms of saving that test match. Well, Somerville's bat, but didn't see that one coming beforehand. But just the way they battled, and even like, because there was a point about an hour to go in that final day session, I was absolutely convinced we were going to lose. And it wouldn't have been a terrible loss. It would have been like, well, we battled, but it also would have been disappointing to get as close as they did and then still lose. They just weren't quite able to get. And then all of a sudden, Ravindra and Patel bat out the last like 52 deliveries and whatever, and they get through like that. It's all part of just the I guess chucking a next man up mentality as well, of getting different, a debutant and a number 11 saving the test with the bat. How good is that? But yeah, the Blackcaps' Shoshin mentality was on full display, I think, in that test match.
Not to mention Will Young.
Of course.
A little pre-match adaptability, probably wasn't going to open, which like before... Imagine the like sliding doors implications. Devon Conway, if he doesn't get injured, they've got Devon Conway in a T20 World Cup final. But then if Devon Conway doesn't get injured, it flows on to Will Young, because everyone was thinking Devon Conway is just going to open for the Blackcaps in every test since making a double century on debut. And now you've got Will Young who comes in. He wasn't probably... But this is where I think things get interesting with Will Young, just quickly, is he seemed to, they made it sound in the commentary, at least, especially Simon Doull, from the Kiwi perspective, he made it seem as though it was a conscious decision from Will Young, Blackcaps selectors, coaching, CD coaching, to upskill to be able to open. That's an entry point to the Blackcaps test team, as you can open. So Will Young...
I think it was, yeah.
Yeah, so over a course of like 3 or 4 years, he's on that journey. He's on that path. And I think you saw a lot of that mahi in his innings. You saw very deliberate soft hands. You saw he's got the strokes, though, from his because he usually bats 3 or 4 for CD on his rise, especially number 4. So he's got a lot of scoring instincts. He likes to play his shots. He's not... That's why I think you kind of... like not taking a shot at you, but you made it seem as though Will Young was in great form and Tom Latham was in shit form, and Will Young was carrying Tom Latham. Whereas I was like, I was thinking it's more natural. It's like Will Young just has more attacking instincts, and Tom Latham is kind of soaking up some of the bullshit, some of the spilt milk, to allow Will Young to be himself, because he is attacking. He's not Jeet Rafael or Tom Latham, those type of players. But he's on that journey for a couple of years, preparing to open. And then Devon Conway comes along. And Devon Conway test century on debut just after Will Young's got his opportunities. And then in a shorter window of time, Devon Conway gets injured. And now Will Young has to prepare to open in India, which would be a nightmare. But he seemed, because he's like, that whole time he's preparing to be an opener, he's not thinking, I'm a test opener. These are the skills I have to work at. Definitely a lot of work on slower turning pitches of India. That's what I need to do. No, he's just like generally trying to prepare as an opener. And then 2 weeks out from the tour, he has to sharpen that to an Indian focus. And that was kind of amazing in his innings, was how effective and efficient he looked for those conditions. And that speaks to his adaptability, the team environment and culture around him to produce that out of him. So yeah, shout out to him as well. Anything you're looking forward to on this next test, as far as just like maybe a selection? Neil Wagner for Will Somerville. I did see that old Vittori thought that as well. So on Crick Info, so I was chuffed about that one. Wagner and for Somerville. That's kind of the team selection thing. A lot of different options have been floated around in the media though, like maybe Ravindra's out, maybe Santa for like whatever it is. A lot of different options have been explored. A lot of talk about Mumbai being a lot more turny and spin friendly, which won't matter to Tim Southey, Neil Wagner, or Kyle Jamieson. Or maybe no runs from Ross Taylor, no runs from Henry Nicholls. Like those are the type of also players who very attack orientated early in the innings, I believe. Like Ross Taylor, when he gets out the bat, he's going to fucking charge you. He's going to like swing hard at the ball. That's his style. That's who Ross Taylor, it's just who he is. And I think Nicholls is the same. That's why they bat 4-5. And that's why they can look so glorious in their stroke making. But like when you're coming in, I think that's why you saw the cluster of wickets as well. Like it's very hard to start in those situations. And their slightly more aggressive starting sets can look pretty terrible in that environment. But then they're moving along, so they'll learn and adapt. And who knows, they might just get a few out of the middle early in their innings, and then they're away. So, but they didn't score runs in the first test, so hopefully they can pick up there. Any one of those things or something else as we wrap up the podcast here that you're looking forward to in the Blackcaps in Mumbai Friday? That one is Friday evening, right?
Yeah, I think it is.
Massive Friday. These are great times.
Double screens again.
We got football. We got fucking cricket on at the same time. Friday, big Super Smash Day as well. Woo-wee.
Gotta make sure I charge my phone beforehand. Yeah. I defend my earlier take on Latham and the Young thing dynamic, but I think you're right in that there was definitely a point where Tom Latham was struggling a bit, left-hander in Indian conditions, blah blah blah. However, he's good at grafting through difficult patches, and there are always going to be some. So yeah, I think it's a little bit in between. Like Young helped him, but he also helped Young, because you knew he could graft through that, and you also knew if Young was comfortable, he would be the guy who was scoring a few more runs. Like he would be scoring at a quicker rate than Latham. That partnership looks really good, eh? Like they really did complement each other nicely. The right hand, left hand thing too. Their sort of array of shots is quite a nice combination. Like they kind of work nicely together. So that was cool. And as to what might change second or what I'm looking forward to second test, I I suspect even if the Mumbai pitch wasn't going to be a big turner, it will be now for the Blackcaps having got a draw in that first test. I think it's a bit of a freebie. I think just taking anything out of a series away to India for test championship points, getting that draw first up takes the pressure off them here. So if they do get smoked, disappointing, but they've still got something out of this series to fall back on, which is more than they can say about what they did when they went to Australia in their most difficult series of the last tour. And yet they still made the final. So sweet ass. I already think they're in a bit of a bonus here. It does sound a little bit like Neil Wagner might be unleashed, but I'm not sure. I think if you bring in Wagner for Somerville, I think you probably also got to bring in Santner for Ravindra just to have more of a experienced, reliable. Because I don't know if Ravindra bowls some nice spin, but I don't know if being the second spinner is really quite. That's a big task, especially if it is going to be a turner where you kind of need that second spinner to clog up some overs. That I don't know. I think they've got nice options in the squad. I'll say that, and I sort of think that is the conditions will dictate things a little bit. Probably not a little bit, probably quite a lot. And therefore, I suspect that they probably don't even quite know how some of those little adjustments might go until maybe even the morning of the test match, see what the weather's like, see what the pitch looks like. And I trust that they'll be adaptable. So I'm like, I don't think those decisions would make if you do bring in Wagner or if you keep the same 11 or whatever, I don't know that those things change things a whole lot. I think with Ross Taylor, I will say I expect him to be a bit better second up because I think he's one of a number of dudes who looked a bit rusty for not having had much cricket because, CD were getting games, but he wasn't able to play because he lived in Hamilton. So he got caught by the regional lockdown. So he's been out of cricket a lot and already seen like Ajaz Patel was the same. I think he probably lives in Auckland, but I'm not sure. But he started a little bit rusty, got a lot better as the test went along with his bowling. So I think there's dudes like that who are in that kind of category. Henry Nicholls isn't one of them because he was playing a lot and scoring some runs for Canterbury too. But from memory, I think he got a shocker in one of those decisions. I'm not sure. I'll say this is my answer to the test now. I've just thought of it. What I hope to see from the second test is much better umpiring because there were a lot of overturned decisions. First innings, I think Williamson was one. There was at least someone else, I can't remember who got the old like umpire's call against you. Didn't really look out with the live eye, but was given out and not quite enough to overturn it. A lot of that stuff going on, which was frustrating. However, the umpires did come through in the clutch for us with their little Game Boy toys. So the light meter came through good for us. So that was nice. But a little bit more consistent umpiring, I don't think would go astray in the second test. I think that was something like that's a big variable for a New Zealand team touring India. And if they're on the wrong side, you expect some of that. That's fine. Anywhere you go, the home team's going to get more, especially if there's a good crowd. Home team's going to get more decisions. It's just the way things go. Apparently changed a whole lot when they started getting neutral umpires, though, which is funny. It's funny how instantly that changed. I was reading about that a while back. But yeah, if that just a few more of the benefit of the doubt ones going towards the New Zealand batsmen, I think could have a massive impact on how competitive they can be in the second test. Not something you can control, so not something the Blackcaps will worry about, but just me chucking this out there.
You literally stole my angle. I was like, hoping for better umpiring is like the least mindful thing you can do in cricket. Like, you got to sharpen up there. Like, surely
this is very much me hoping, not the Blackcaps. They do what they do, I'm just umpires call it's going over the top. Just don't give it. Just don't,
Those two umpires in the first test they were an odd bunch. But I will say, just one last little nugget here. The dudes who scored runs, Tom Latham, Will Young, Ajaz Patel, Rachin Ravindra, they all played in Bangladesh in the T20 International Series.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that.
So that might help.
So did Henry Nicholls, but
and I think he was a bit more hectic because he had to go from Bangladesh back to New Zealand for Plunket Shield, then to India. That's a bit crazy. Whereas Patel didn't play, and Tom Latham was probably right by Henry Nicholls' side the whole time, and he's
they're probably sitting next to each other on the plane.
Yeah. Great nugget, that one. Fantastic. And
Well,
we'll
like I
finish-
said, I think Nichols got. I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure he got one stink decision. So that can be the difference between a good Test match. And he might have carried on and got 100 otherwise. I actually think he's quite good against spin because he's got good footwork and he's got good
Sweep
hands.
shot.
So yeah, great sweep shot. One of the
And
best
I'd like-
sweepers in that team. So
if you think
I'd
about
back him.
if we're just thinking about wider and his like life, him and Tom Latham spent a lot of time together, I'd say. Like they grew up in and around Christchurch together. They literally have this they have very similar careers in what formats they play, what tours they go on. So if Tom Latham's looking pretty good in these conditions, I'm just of the assumption that Henry Nicholls is working on the same things because he's right there with them the whole time. And he's got all those tools and skills to draw upon. So that a prediction may be there for some Henry Nicholls runs in the second test and maybe a couple of slog sweeps from old Laturu Taylor. We'll finish the podcast there. Kia kaha, stay beautiful. Mauri ora. Chirp.